Hello, welcome to another weekly update. I don't know about you, I thought things were supposed to slow down as we got towards Christmas. That doesn't seem to be happening yet. Certainly nothing shows any signs of slowing down at the moment, but that's okay. Like it's interesting that things keep happening. They're all interesting, exciting things. Got a couple of things to talk about this week. Not loads and loads of URLs to go through with you, but three things. But all three of those things warrant a little bit of talking about. So it's good to have the time to be able to go into them in a bit more detail. All right, so let's talk about the first thing. So the first thing is nothing to do with Microsoft Teams, but it is everything to do with communication and calling and development. So let's wind backwards a little bit to Microsoft Ignite and the announcement of Azure Communication Services. Announced at Ignite earlier this year. It's a great kind of fanfare, really exciting. It's a way for developers in Azure to spin up a resource inside their Azure tenant to an Azure Communication Services instance, and what that gives them is the ability to make voice over IP, video, audio calls using WebRTC to send messages via SMS, and I think probably some other functionality as well. I can't even remember. So it's a kind of exciting communication stack as a service in Azure. So yeah, pretty interesting. So that was kind of in my head, knocking around my head for a bit, and then I was kind of looking through some other announcements also at Ignite, and there's something else in Azure called static web apps. So they are kind of just interesting because they are tied. The way you deploy the code to them is via GitHub. So you tie them to a GitHub project, and then any changes that get made to that project and the code in that project, the way that works is that it kind of automatically creates a GitHub action and pushes that data up and to pushes that data up to your static web app. So that is kind of an interesting model, and they're currently free because they're in preview. They're kind of a very lightweight. They're meant for us to kind of single page applications. They're kind of a lightweight way of hosting static web apps. The kind of thing that makes them interesting as well, though, that they went into GA at Ignite, but the really interesting thing for me that kind of unlocked something was that you can write Azure Functions for static web apps as well and have them live in like an API folder. So you've got the application, so you might have your React app or your Angular app, whatever it is, that is kind of compiled to your static web pages in JavaScript. But then separately, you can have Azure Functions. Now, all those get packaged inside the same static web app. It's not like I'm saying you have to go and make some Azure Functions in Azure. You don't. You just write them using the same kind of language of C#. The structure looks the same. They're called Azure Functions under the hood, but actually they're kind of living inside this static web app container. And that is interesting because it means that you can have like a front end and a back end service, back end written using functions, front end just kind of React or whatever, but all packaged inside the same web app, all pointed to a GitHub repository so that any changes you make, you've got a perfect pipeline through into publishing. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about Azure Communication Services, and I was also kind of spent some time just thinking about like how we've been doing calling in 2020. And I don't mean like work and business and stuff. I'm talking about how outside of work, how we talk to each other. And I don't know about you, but we do family calls every week with kind of the extended family, the grandparents and all that kind of stuff. And it's a kind of a challenge to figure out the right technology to use there. Do you use Teams? Because actually outside of businesses, like lots of people who, don't use Teams at work don't really get Teams for home. Like the Teams personal thing is new and exciting, but right now, like lots of people don't have it. So now you're making somebody download an app. Maybe you're giving them a credential to like a kind of a pseudo business account that you might have made in your tenant. Like it's not a perfect scenario. And then you've got to walk them through, like if it's kind of your parents or your grandparents or whatever, you're trying to walk them through downloading the Teams app, signing in as somebody. Like it's not great. And then some of the other services as well also have their problems and sort of disadvantages and problems and all the rest of it. And so I was kind of looking around for something else, and I was like, wouldn't it be great if we could just make something? Because if we can make something, we can just make it perfect for like our family, how we like to do things, how we want it to work. And then kind of all those things came together, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be good if we could use Azure Communication Services and also so Azure Communication Services has a really good group calling sample application for doing group calls, so kind of like family calls, like group calls. But there's a couple of sort of limitations with it that mean it's not the perfect match. There's no entry code, for instance, and it's kind of meant to showcase how ACS works. It's not meant to be used kind of for actual calling, so like you have to paste in the group ID or just all this sort of stuff. So I put all those things together and mixed them around and worked on them for a little bit, and I've come up with an Azure static web app that hosts the Azure Communication Services group sampling app, which I've changed a bit. I've added like an entry code, I've taken away the ability to need to put in a group ID. I've kind of simplified some of the steps and made it into like a family group calling thing. And so I've got a whole blog post and video about it. If any of that sounds interesting, so the how-to blog post is, you don't have to be a developer at all. Let me show you what it looks like. You can follow through all of these instructions without writing any code at all. If you are a developer, it'll be interesting anyway. Like you'll see places where you'll want to dive in, that's fine. And all the source code is all in GitHub, and actually what happens, one of the first steps you do is copy the source code. I've made a GitHub template so you can take the source code directly into your repository. You need to do that to tie it to your static web app instance. So anyway, all the instructions for doing that are in here. I'll just show you some of the screenshots for like what it looks like at the other end. So you get this nice experience, like it's just this single page app here where you put in, I haven't got a screenshot of putting the entry code in, but you put an entry code in, put your name, camera, microphone, you're dropped into a WebRTC instance. So you basically, it all runs inside a web page because it's WebRTC, so you haven't got to like make people download apps or anything like that, which can be a real stumbling block for kind of different people in the family if they're not completely up to date with like downloading stuff and installing stuff and configuring stuff. So it's all done as a web page. It also means it works on iPads and phones and tablets and whatever else it is. So that's kind of interesting. So all of that is there. There's also a long video about it where I walk through exactly how it works, and kind of walk through the steps of setting it up as well, so you can follow that as well. So all of that is there. That's kind of like an interesting one this week. It's kind of not really Teams, but it is calling and communication based, so I thought it was worth talking about. Kind of interesting thing that's happening. All right, other things that are happening. So this I kind of wrote up today. Turns out it's been a busy week for Microsoft Teams as well, specifically adding functionality to Microsoft Graph for developers. So a whole bunch of new API endpoints just got added to both the 1.0 and the beta Graph endpoints. So there's things now for working with apps in Microsoft Teams. There's a whole bunch of beta endpoints that have just been promoted to 1.0. Things for kind of support for managing applications in Teams. So installing, uninstalling, listing, getting, all that sort of stuff. So they've been in beta for a while. It's great to see them go to 1.0. That will unlock the places where I think they're really needed. So this type of control of applications is really important for enterprises and larger organizations that have a lot of governance and infosec concerns and procedures to follow and steps and all the rest of it. They really could use these APIs to help streamline that service and make it better. So it's really good to see them go into 1.0, because I know that will have been a blocker for kind of lots of enterprises who can't use the beta endpoints. But we've had some new API calls into beta as well for managing applications and tabs in chat conversations. So this has been around a little while in the UI for Teams, but if you're in a one-to-one or group chat with someone or people, you can add apps and tabs to that experience as well. You're not just limited to doing it into like a bot conversation or like a team conversation, a grid channel conversation. You can do it in chat, but there hasn't really been the API support to do that programmatically. So it's good to see those APIs come along as well. To kind of control those applications in chat, and also tabs as well in chat. So all the kind of CRUD sort of controls, as well as upgrading applications as well, which is obviously an important one. And then finally, two kind of new, very interesting APIs, interesting to anyone who is interested in pulling data from graph in kind of bulk, or understanding what people are doing over time, reporting and trending and analysis of data. Two new APIs. The first to, for a specific user, go and get all of their chat messages. So like across the board, across the tenant, for that user, all of their one-to-one chats, all of their group chats, all of their meeting chats, anywhere that they have chatted, any interaction they've had that's not captured by channel chat or anything like specifically into an application will get caught by this. So that's really cool, really interesting. This is a protected API call. So protected API calls need prior authorization from Microsoft. There's a form to fill in. I'll put a link in the blog post because it gives access to really kind of personal data. It's your chat history. So I think, that's why it's a protected API. You can filter, because obviously you're going to get an awful lot of data if you do this for a user that's been around for a while. You're going to get an awful lot of data on this. So there are OData filters, so you can filter it. So for instance, you can filter on the last modified time between two values, so you can do that. But yeah, big new interesting slew of data there that is being surfaced. Message data, really, really interesting. And also channel messages. So I guess you can kind of get this anyway, but sort of. So you can kind of go through every channel in a team and get the messages in the channel. I'm not sure if you do that, whether you get the text of video conversations and audio conversations that happen inside that channel in the kind of text, the IM sort of modality of those. Anyway, this new API, you do get all those things. So the way this one works is you do it against a specific team, and it gets all the messages across all of the channels in that team. And like I say, includes text, audio, video conversations. Again, also a protected API call. Unfortunately, there's no OData parameters on this, so you're going to get a lot of data regardless of what you do. I think the way the data comes back paged, so you'll get a certain amount of results, and you can step through pages to get the rest. But yeah, this makes it much easier for people to get large amounts of information out of Microsoft Teams. So yeah, if that's you, you'll find this really useful. But I'm interested and excited for the kind of get chat messages one as well, because that definitely unlocks a lot of scenarios around user sentiment and understanding what users are doing over time as well. So that's good. And then finally, the other thing I want to talk about is this, the Microsoft Graph Mailbag blog series. So the Microsoft team are starting a new series of blog posts called the Microsoft Graph Mailbag. They are, it's kind of a series of they call it insights, lessons learned, and useful samples for working with Microsoft Graph and other related services. The idea is that each blog post is kind of 5 to 10 minutes. It's called a mailbag. That sort of makes it sound like they're going to solicit you can write into them and they'll answer your questions. And I think they've done this before. I vaguely remember the Microsoft Graph team doing something like this before, perhaps, or maybe it was a different team. I can't remember, but I think that probably is the intent. But initially, I think they're just using internally sourced topics for the first few months. So it's like a mailbag, but the mailbag, you can't write into it. Microsoft can write into it for now. Maybe in the future, you'll be able to write into it too. So interesting. So that's what that is. This sounds interesting. It sounds like it's going to be a really useful place for tips and tricks. Good place to get the kind of detail of things, and good place to come for some tips and tricks. So I'm going to be monitoring this as well. If anything exciting and interesting comes out of it, I shall let you know here as well. Okay, I think that's everything I want to talk about. A bit of a ramble on some of those things, but it's been kind of an interesting, busy week. The ACS stuff I think is really interesting, really exciting. So if you haven't looked at any of that Azure Communication Services stuff, I'd say it's definitely worth looking at. If you're looking at developing anything kind of communication based, it's worth kind of calling out again and again. There's no integration with Microsoft Teams right now. So there's that. But I mean, like, it's coming. I think they talked about this at Ignite. It's something they obviously want to see, but there's obviously no timelines on it or anything like that. So yeah, that's kind of interesting, but depending on your use case, it might be that actually doing WebRTC and just doing that, but in something managed, like, into your Azure tenant in a managed way, it is unlocks the right kind of capabilities for you for the project you're working on. All right, that's everything from me. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a great weekend, whatever it is you're doing, and I will talk to you again next time.